I'm Hank Stoltz, and thank you for joining us on Central Mass Chronicles. And what we do on each show is we take a look, whether it is a national issue, whether it's state issues, whether it's local issues, which is what we are going to be focusing on in this particular episode. We always do it with a Central Mass perspective, and we have our keen observers here of the Central Mass scene for this panel. Steve Jones D'Agostino, thank you for being here. Hilda Ramirez, thank you for being here. And our Dean of the Delegation, Roberta Schaefer, who has been on the Central Mass Chronicles for a number of years here as well. Steve, I think I'm going to start with you, if I could, please, as the newcomer to our panel this week. Let's talk a little bit about Konnie Lukes. City Councilor Konnie Lukes, over 30 years, and we go back probably closer to 40 years when we count school committee and the number of years that she has been on the City Council. She recently said that she is not going to be seeking re-election. What does this mean for the City Council race, and what do you think is the legacy of the contrarian? I know she hates that term, but the contrarian of the City Council.
I think that that's exactly what she's been, the maverick, the contrarian, the person who says there's something smelly going on here when everybody else is acting as though there isn't. Did I always agree with every position she took? Of course not, but that's the nature of politics. But on the whole, I think that we're going to be losing a valuable asset, and hopefully we have a replacement sometime soon. You know, Winston Churchill once said about democracy, it's a terrible form of government, but it's the worst form of government except all the others that have been tried from time to time. It's just the nature of the beast. You've got to be messy sometimes.
Do you think,
to
Steve,
keep things
that
in the
when
light.
we talk about her being a contrarian and being hard to replace, and others can jump in here too, do you think that sometimes she wanted to be that 10-1 vote? Did she always believe? Did she have the courage of her convictions? Or sometimes, you know what, my constituency wants me to be on the end of this 10-1 vote, and I'm going to be a contrarian just to be a contrarian? I
mean, it could be that. I mean, that's the nature of politics. Sometimes you have to do it on principle, and other times you have to do it to, serve your constituency. So there was probably a combination of those situations.
What do you think, Roberta?
I think, first of all, I agree wholeheartedly with Steve that she has been a very valuable asset on the council, and I'm sorry to see her go. Again, I don't agree with her on everything. The main issue was her vote on the tax rate. She always voted the lowest rate for the homeowner, and I disagree with that wholeheartedly, because what's happened over the years is that the homeowner is paying more, the businesses are paying more, and nobody's benefiting. So I would disagree. But on other things, her looking at the budget and picking out things that I'm wondering whether we have a good deal on the baseball park and so on. I mean, all of these are issues that need to be raised, and I was glad that she was there to raise them. I don't think that she just did it to be the one on the 10-1 vote. I think she had certain principles and tried to stick by them. And when you talk about her constituency, she was in a district council, she at-large council, so she's supposed to be representing everybody in the city. And I think that she tried to do that, and I would bet that on lots of things that her constituency shifted depending on what the issue was.
She's been really one of the top vote getters too.
Yeah,
right.
These last few years, I mean, there are those who are saying that she saw the handwriting on the wall, and that's why she didn't run. I'm not so sure about that, Hilda, who thought that she might not be reelected. But some would say that her constituency, her political foes would say her constituency was the naysayers of the city of Worcester.
I mean, my perspective with Konnie Lukes, and it's interesting because I have a very different, I worked with Konnie when, for the search committee for Dr. Boone, and I thought that was a bold move on her part. I was proud to be on a committee that was neutral enough to select the best candidate and move that candidate forward, even with a lot of criticism. So that's one area where I think that her style had success. Maybe not everybody agrees with that. I understand that different people, but that brought us diversity to this city. A woman of color, and some people don't agree, but I happen to have supported that leadership.
I would say that when you look back at her legacy, and I haven't had a chance to ask her directly this, she may think that is the biggest part of her legacy, and also because I think, Hilda, that she was always kind of fighting against the old boys club. She would
Right.
use that term
Right.
of the old
Oh,
boys
yes.
club.
Right, and I
yeah.
think that that's exactly what she demonstrated there, that you can do it differently. And she brought in a committee. I was part of that, and so was the John O'Brien from UMass, and Dennis Berkey from WPI, and some others that I might be forgetting, a faculty from Framingham State. So different people that normally were not even in the scene. I was the executive director, had just been named the executive director of the youth center. So passionate about education, and I thought that, you know, I did represent a sector of that piece of the pie. And I thought that it was really important to have people that had these different perspectives to be part of education, which I think sometimes we're lacking sometimes in this city, that we need to bring the people to the table that are most impacted and into the decision making.
Well,
And
interesting that these are the issues, and we'll get to them a little bit
Right,
later in the
right.
show, that we're still talking about in the city,
Absolutely.
you know, X number of years later. Steve brought up something a moment ago that I'd like the rest of you to weigh in on as well, about the fact that, you know, Maverick, call her what you will, that will be missing from the council. Do you think that is that true? I mean, will that be missing? Is there anybody on the council now who could step up and fill that role?
No. I don't see
think so.
anybody at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there are people in the middle of the road, right? Not this way or that way, but sort of more central. But I don't know that they have the experience maybe in elected office. I'm thinking of like Matt Wally, who sits in the center, and I support him. I like his style, but he's new to it, right? So when you're new, you just don't know, and so I think that you need somebody with seasoned experience, I think, to navigate.
Well,
You
I
know.
think you're right. It'll be interesting to see not just who gets elected. I mean, there will obviously be at least one new person on the council, but whether anybody else will step up now, because they were sort of reticent to do that because Konnie was out there by herself, and maybe they didn't want to be associated with the lone wolf, and now maybe they will feel more comfortable stepping forward. I think it's absolutely essential that you have so that there's some debate on the council. And what's the council for? It's not just there to rubber stamp what the city manager puts forth.
Yeah, and she had a different style than because I was just thinking about, you know, I mean, other Mavericks in the past, but she wasn't Michael Gaffney, who it became so
he was
poisonous
well, he
by
was
the
destructive.
end.
No,
He
it
was negative and
Ar-
destructive.
Arthur
He-
Chase comes closest in terms of
Yes.
the similar style of raising them.
And back when Konnie got on, there was Jordan Levy and Paul
Yeah.
Leahy and
What-
Arthur
what,
Chase. And so she wasn't one
Yeah,
among 11.
What bothered me about both of them, both Chase and Konnie, and maybe this was just inevitable, was that because she was taking a position that I don't know whether the others disagreed because they disagreed really on an intellectual level, or because they just don't like Konnie or her style. But when you step forward with a different position, you have to work in advance. I mean, this would be, if I ran the zoo, that you would try to build a coalition for your position in advance of stating it publicly at the council meeting, and so that you know at least you have some supporters behind you, that you're not
Right.
out there by yourself.
Not always in that
And
town
Arthur,
one, and
Arthur was that way.
That
and
may be
so
where
was-
I think
so
that's
was
probably
Konnie.
where we're going to have to leave it. We're going to
Okay.
get to the MidTown Mall. We're going to get to the superintendent. Some of these issues may be overlapping, as a matter of fact, as we go along as
Yeah, I think they
well.
all do.
And
History comes
if there's
full
right,
circle.
and there may be some beneficiaries. Donna Clorio comes to mind, who maybe a constituency that supported Konnie Lukes might be looking for someone, woman head of the Republican Party, might be thought of a little bit of as an outsider, and we'll see if that helps her. But we were going to be talking about the MidTown Mall straight ahead.
Scoreless into the third, and that's when Smith makes a great diving catch, jubilant diving catch, redonkulous diving catch, super duper diving catch.
That was sensational.
Sensational diving catch.
Local news from Central Massachusetts for Central Massachusetts.
A tornado warning is issued for parts of Central Massachusetts. More than 100 storage units are broken into at a facility on Millbury Street. One person is taken to the hospital by medical helicopter after falling from a construction site. Crews battle a fire inside a Millbury home.
Reporters in the field. And an in-depth local forecast. Worcester News tonight on Charter TV3.
Brent's back to the wall, and that one is gone. 3-2, and that ball hit hard.
Follow the Boss Hawks all season long with select games from Charter TV3 and visit chartertv3.com for a complete game telecast schedule. Presented by Candiani Insurance Agency, Bay State Savings Bank, and the law offices of Joseph J. Cariglia.
The conversation just continues. I don't. Well, sometime we'll let
We
you
should
know when
record
you're
this.
gonna- I hope they realize that this is now live and that everything that they are saying is going out. I mean, we've given them warning. We've got lights and everything else. Steve, why don't you and I talk about the MidTown Mall? I still don't think that they understand that everything that you're saying has now gone out to the audience. I just want to make sure that you know that the lights are on. We've been back for like a minute. Now,
The Russian.
I mean, I don't know how
The
much. I don't
Russians
know
have
how
been
much
hacking
more
this
we
for
could
the last
talk
minute or so.
or say or let people know. So
I'm not embarrassed.
I'm not
by
okay.
anything.
So now that's all right.
You have a high threshold for embarrassment, right?
Let's go with as if I have any control over what is actually happening here at Central Mass Chronicles. Hilda, let's talk a little bit about the MidTown Mall and what is now the sale of the MidTown Mall. City has decided, and apparently is going to continue, even with a new owner apparently, to perhaps look at taking it by eminent domain. They say it's never been about the owner. It's been about the fact that you have this eyesore in downtown and it's screwing up their renaissance. What's your take on the MidTown Mall?
Well, I do believe that it needs upgrade, right? That it needs to look a little different. I do hope, though, that the plans, which have not been laid out yet, but that are to somehow help the small businesses that are there to somehow stay there and thrive, so that we're not displacing the small businesses out of the area, right? So I do want to see things that are buildings that look better, that that can be that can look the way that the city is looking. But I would love to see that being done in a thoughtful way where those small businesses that have worked hard to establish there have some stake in it too. And so that's what I'm hoping happens to it.
Yeah, I wonder I don't know about these small businesses. I got to say, I mean, they all sort of rallied around Dean Marcus, who I guess I will now refer to as the former owner, because he, in his largesse, I don't know, he was out there like he was the Statue of Liberty with his lamp of liberty. I'm not buying that for one
Well, I think
moment.
they're also afraid of eminent
by the
domain.
way.
Okay,
Right.
Too.
So,
But
Because-
yeah, so now what happens to them? A new owner comes in, he makes these upgrades,
so
the rent
first,
goes up.
Right.
Right.
That's inevitable if you're going to do anything with
Right.
it. And also, he's been able to get away with it all these years because the properties around it had not been upgraded yet.
Right.
Now, that property is the eyesore around the common.
He's the
everything,
canary. He's the canary in the mine.
everything else has been. But the fact that he sold it to the manager of those of the property tells you something that, the first thought is, well, if this guy's been managing and it looks like that, how is it going to be any different
Well,
now?
this is a
And
little
so-
bit of meet the new boss, same as the old boss. So the person isn't just the manager now. This Mr. Lana is the guy who owns the properties right next to it.
Right,
yeah.
right.
So the question is,
So-
does he have the deep pockets
so-
or deep enough
well,
pockets to bring it up to
and
the
of course, we
$4
don't
million
know, but
to
I
buy it.
agree that the WRA needs to keep at it because and have him meet with them as soon as possible and say what he's going to do and what the timetable is, because that is the single biggest problem around the common. The common itself has been upgraded, and as far as the people who are in there, the tenants, so the rents go up. Now, if the WRA takes it by eminent domain, it is obliged to help the people in
Right.
there to find, if they can't afford those rents, to find new places. Now, I don't know exactly what's in there because I haven't been inside. I confess I have not been frequenting the place of late. And there may be better places in the city for those businesses closer to their customers. You know, if you're talking about, you know, things that are specifically ethnic related, it may be.
I disagree
But what is
with
the
that.
demand, though, for that property? Is it going to be torn down and another parking lot put up?
Right.
We don't do any marketing, and I'm not talking about keychains and coffee cups and things like that. I'm talking about strategic marketing to position our city economically for development. We haven't spent a dime on strategic marketing since 2008. That's 11 years ago. We can't sustain that. And that's why downtown we're spending billions of dollars, and what is it, 40% of the commercial property is vacant in downtown Worcester.
Right, which is interesting because I think that part of what they are talking about is that it isn't just what we think of as the MidTown Mall, which are these stores. And one of the funny things, because I am a frequenter of the MidTown Mall, I don't buy anything, but I walk through there probably 4 or 5 times a week. They've gotten the tattoo parlor, this new person Successful. These are businesses where these people, they have put money, they have clearly put money into these businesses that they have there and are going concerns. But I understand that it is that they have this office space up above that apparently they feel is valuable. But that's where I think you're dead on, Steve. So you have somebody who right next to him has not been able to apparently rent out the office space that he has. What are they going to do? And I'm wondering if
we're just rearranging chairs on the deck of the Titanic. Una moved from the old Paul Revere building into their new building. The old Paul Revere building is pretty empty.
But I think that where the fly in the ointment for the city is that what they wanted, Hilda, was that they wanted to make this move. They didn't want him to sell it to the guy that he sold it to.
Right. But I think that I do believe that developers are also aware of how you can make this happen. I mean, Boston is an example where you do have some of these ethnic buildings right in downtown, right in the commercial areas, and they have worked really well. I saw that happening somewhat in Jamaica Plain, a transformation of, you know, gentrification, but including the businesses and helping the businesses upgrade so that they kind of also transform with the space. And I think that, I mean, if there's an owner that has a lot of investment already down there, I think that it would be nice to see that happen.
But this is where the marketing comes in. Boston, 3 million people go into Boston each day.
Right.
The population is only 700,000.
Right.
3 million people go into that city. We don't have even close to 500,000 coming into Worcester during the daytime.
But we do actually. I don't know how many of you have walked downtown, even like a little bit after hours or on weekends. There is a lot
There's
more.
activity.
There's
There's
more
a
density.
lot more activity.
Relatively speaking, yes, but
I
go down. It's
I don't
much
think
more
we're- I don't think we're
density
there yet. I
in
mean,
the
and you
Kelly
do have
Square.
and
for
back
example.
to the MidTown Mall and where we started about the look of it. So now when you have the AC Marriott, now when you have, you know, Woo-Ha-Ha.
Right.
I mean, it's a tale of two sides of the street. Boy, Franklin Street seems to be taking off with Revolution Pies and Pints and the Brew Garden and, you know, Brew on the Grid. You've got Fuel on one end, you've got Front Street, and you've got the redone Harrington Corner on the other. And then we're back to, you have right in the middle of the MidTown Mall. I understand their point. I'm not sure about taking it by eminent domain. But I don't know that a new paint job is really to go to what everybody is saying.
Which is
what
more
you need.
blighted, all of Main Street or the MidTown Mall?
I know.
Well,
A lot of Main Street is boarded
yeah,
up
I know,
more
but
so
when
than
you
the
but when
Midtown
you
Mall
have the
in terms of an
surrounding
eyesore.
buildings, the surrounding buildings on Front Street have been upgraded, except for that little.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's much more noticeable.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Than the absence of tenants on
So
Main
do a
Street.
facade improvement.
No,
Fix the facade.
It's
Which
much
seems to be what
more
he
than
says, but which seems to be what the new owner is kind of saying,
Right.
which apparently is giving the tenants hope that, okay, we're going to be able to stick around maybe for this lower rent. I think that what the WRA is saying is, oh, it isn't just Dean Marcus. Now we still want to know Dean Marcus. We still want you to write a business plan, which I'm sure he is busy working on.
Exactly.
And for the new owner, I think that they're going to want him to come in and talk to them. I don't know if they would really proceed against him with eminent domain, but they're making noises like they could.
Yes, it depends on how long it takes, because they're not going to wait another 10 years to do it, because it is interesting that on the other side of the common, you got Boston developers
Yes,
coming in,
Wind development.
and all Dean Marcus could find was his manager. You know,
Well, I
that's
don't know.
hard.
That still seems to
That's
be
hard to
on
believe.
my way out the door. I'll
Right.
take $4 million,
Well, I
which is okay, but it's still a thumb in the eye. Because for years, part of what Dean Marcus argued was, if you're going to assess me at $5.5 million, then I've got to get $5.5 million.
Or why not create a business improvement district downtown?
Right, that's.
Well,
And say to people like Dean Marcus, rather than paying property taxes into the general coffers, use it to fix up your property.
I think the bottom line is he was not going to do anything. I mean,
Well,
this has
then
been-
you could humiliate him at least.
He's not subject to humiliation. There are some people who just don't care. This
No
is
offense,
not,
Dean.
No, seriously.
We all love you.
Seriously. I mean, you know, it was clear that he just did not have any. The number of years he has stalled.
Yeah,
it was just
right.
incredible. And
But he's been allowed to stall.
Well,
by
okay, so now they
lack
said,
of energy in the part of the city
but
of Worcester
again, it was
and the
because
Chamber of Commerce.
it was because there wasn't anything else happening
Right,
in the common.
exactly.
Now that it has
It is, yeah.
happened, you know, now they
Well,
can
has
really
it happened?
Well, certainly on the other side.
On the other side.
The common looks really nice.
Yes, yes.
The oval, you know, there's a lot more activity, and you know, and it looks, you know.
But again,
it certainly
no
looks
marketing
much-
plan whatsoever.
Well,
the
that-
rest of the world does not know that Worcester exists.
Well, I don't know about
We-
that.
you have to
I mean,
that's
we
true
just
now.
mentioned
And show
the
them the
chamber, and
assets.
we want to move on to the superintendent. But
Yeah.
you just mentioned the chamber. I mean, the chamber had to move in Boston to a larger venue because they had so many people, so many developers show up that wanted to hear about what is happening
Right.
in
In
Worcester.
Boston.
In
Oh,
Worcester.
in Worcester, okay.
In Worcester.
Yeah, Boston
Well, yeah,
developers
they
who
want to
wanna
know
come.
what are the deals on the table, what are the tax breaks, and how long can I spread that tax break out over?
Discussion for another time
exactly.
is how many people with deep pockets will buy a property in Worcester,
Right.
hold on to it, and not develop it for a number of years.
get
over
tax
and
But
over,
the,
write-offs.
and
the,
we'll
the
have-
bottom line is the WRA has to keep after this guy to do
Right.
something with the
And a whole
Right.
bunch of other people too.
Here's what we're
I
going to do.
think so.
Clearly, they'll just keep talking, but we will be back for an actual conversation about the superintendent of schools in just a moment, right here on Central Mass Chronicles.
Local news from Central Massachusetts for Central Massachusetts.
A tornado warning is issued for parts of Central Massachusetts. More than 100 storage units are broken into at a facility on Millbury Street. One person is taken to the hospital by medical helicopter after falling from a construction site. Crews battle a fire inside a Millbury home.
Reporters in the field. And an in-depth local forecast. Worcester News Tonight on Charter TV3.
There has been this vicious rumor that Jim Polito wears Crocs. We're talking about those rubber clogs, when in fact, it was another producer. Steve spoke up and said, I wear Crocs, and sent me a picture. Steve, I would have never have known those are Crocs. I was trying to figure out, like, wow, is Steve wearing like Crocs where the top part is canvas and, you know, it's still got that little strap in the back? I'm thinking, what the heck is he wearing?
You can't get Worcester weather from a Boston TV station. The sun could be shining in downtown Boston, but the weather could be very different here in Worcester. People tell me all the time how much they count on our weather forecast, and we know how important that is to our Worcester News Tonight viewers. Each weekday, we'll give you your weather, your 10-day forecast for right here in Worcester, only on Worcester News Tonight.
Worcester's only local forecast, weeknights on Worcester News Tonight.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the superintendent of schools. We'll start with Roberta Schaefer about the superintendent. So we've been talking about this for a month now, Roberta, and I don't want to rehash everything that we have talked about, because what keeps happening, and I guess the reason that I say we don't want to rehash is because some of this continues to be a rehash. The latest was, and by the time some people see this, we may have a decision on the superintendent of schools. I understand that. But some of the latest rehash was at the last school committee meeting before we filmed this episode. You once again had people who came forward who said, we don't, particularly younger people, we don't support the superintendent of schools. You had teachers, people who had previously been employed in the schools who said, we do. The observation that was made by the young student representative to the school committee was, you know what? The people, and I think he made it in as non-judgmental a way as you could, said, you know, the people who have come out today and have spoken for the superintendent, middle-aged white people, the people who are calling for change, young people of color. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, again, what is going to, my guess would be that the superintendent will get a 3-year contract, but that observation, where do we go from here?
Okay, we've got a serious problem here. You mentioned, I think you mentioned about the budget of the managers come out with it. The Worcester Public Schools have a budget now about $400 million, and it's by far the largest chunk of the budget.
58%.
And we have a huge problem that has not been addressed. The idea that there are people coming out and saying the system is racist and this is, a chronic problem, it's been this way for years, and the teachers are, they're not conscious, unconscious bias and so on and so forth. And all these figures being thrown around about suspensions, what I have yet to see is an objective evaluation of the whole suspension issue, the behavioral problems, and so on. What is behind this? My recommendation, again, if I ran the zoo, would be at this point to ask the state, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or the commissioner, who's ever responsible, to take a look at all the data. It shouldn't be Worcester State anymore because they've been involved with the Latino community. It should not be the superintendent. And the school committee is split. There are serious problems there in terms of how they operate and what they're capable of doing. And there should be a look from elsewhere, an objective look of what is happening here. What are the reasons for the suspensions? There has been certainly nothing in the press to show what the reasons are for the suspensions of the Hispanic students,
or what metrics
the reasons,
they use.
What the reasons are for the white suspensions. Is there really a difference? We have not seen an objective analysis of that. And until you have that, they should put the whole issue of the superintendent's contract on hold, because no matter what they do, if they give her another contract, the people of color in the city are going to be very upset, and they're not going to be cooperating with the school system. And if you don't give her a contract, the teachers, the union, they're going to be furious.
And I know the mayor's task force on the Latino Commission is going to be coming out with something at the end of August that might have some of these issues addressed. I want to make sure, because we only have a couple minutes left. I want to get to everybody else.
But this is really important because the future of the whole system is at stake now. When you got people running around racist, we have a serious problem, and it has to be objectively looked
Hilda,
at.
Steve, we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to make sure that I get your opinions in as well.
Right. So I agree with Roberta that it has to be a neutral source coming in. We don't do enough of getting people around the table when we have issues in this city. And this is a symptom of that. Not only with education, but even the opiate crisis. We're not meeting as a community to talk about the things that are not working. So there is plenty of data that gives you
To Roberta's point,
right.
Whether she gets the contract or not, can the two sides come together, or the well has already been poisoned too much?
I think it's been poisoned
to
too
talk
much.
about
It's been heard, and
Yeah.
it's been and where it has been heard the most is with young people, with students that are minors and that are in those schools,
But
right?
Hilda, I would argue it's the adults
Steve, we
who
only
are
have a
putting
minute
them up
left.
to it. It's not the students by themselves.
And I'm going to go way out here on a limb and say that perhaps the only thing that will really work in a place like Worcester, and this is other communities in the Commonwealth and in the country, is a RICO suit under the Massachusetts Constitution that was drafted in part by John Adams. You should see how in-depth your right to a public education is in this state compared to other states. It's far more specific than the First and Second Amendments of the U.S. Constitution.
That is a little out there. Listen,
use that,
30 seconds.
Use that to file a
30
RICO
seconds,
suit.
I want to
get him with a racketeering, influence, corrupt
you think
organization.
That, Roberta just threw out there, is it political?
Lawsuit.
Are these kids?
It's political, and it's also corrupt.
So, but you think that these kids are being driven by adults?
Absolutely. There's no question in my mind.
And I think the unions are too. The unions do not have good intentions.
The union
I'm not talking about the union members.
I'm not talking about
leadership.
All right,
the leadership.
Our conversation will continue,
yes.
but that's where we leave you for this episode
after
of
the-
Central
after
Mass
the
Chronicles.
objective
Thank you for
analysis,
joining us.
we need